The scream tore through the night like glass shattering. James froze in the abandoned farmhouse doorway, the sound making his stomach twist. His breath caught as silence swallowed the air. He whispered, "Who's there?" But the dark gave no answer. The air was damp, heavy with the metallic scent of blood. His shoes creaked on warped wood as he stepped forward, dread crawling up his spine. A thud echoed from the hall, slow and steady, like something being dragged. Shadows stretched unnaturally, long against cracked plaster walls. The air felt colder with every step, each breath misting before him. James' pulse hammered as he reached the doorway where darkness pooled like ink. The whisper came then, his name spoken in a hoarse rasp that seemed to scrape against bone. His chest tightened as terror rooted him to the spot, the night pressing down as if the house itself was waiting. James stumbled into his apartment, locking the door behind him as if shadows had followed. His chest heaved, sweat cooling on his skin. He set his flashlight on the table, hands still trembling. On the counter sat an old VHS tape he didn't own. His heart thudded as he stared at it, dread dripping heavier than sweat. "No, it wasn't here before," James muttered. The tape's label was blank, the plastic worn. His fingers brushed its edge, icy to the touch, as though it had been waiting. His reflection stared back in the black sheen, tired eyes filled with fear. He backed away, but the room seemed to shrink, pulling him closer. The silence pressed in, loud enough to crush his thoughts. Against reason, against instinct, his hand reached again for the tape, trembling but unable to resist its weight. The television flickered alive with static, though James hadn't pressed play. His breath caught as the image shifted, revealing himself on screen. He was younger, calmer, but unmistakably him. The figure on screen dragged a body wrapped in plastic across cracked floorboards. James gasped, clutching his chest, whispering, "That's not me. It can't be." The sound of the body thudding against wood echoed in the room, perfectly matching what he had heard at the farmhouse. He pressed pause, but the image flickered back on, the body moving again. His skin crawled, as if unseen eyes stared from behind the television. His reflection in the screen stared back, pale and terrified, merging with the version of him committing unspeakable crimes. James stumbled back, his hand striking a lamp and sending it crashing. He pressed both palms to his temples, shaking his head violently. "This isn't real," he whispered, his voice breaking. The air felt charged, electric, as if the room itself held its breath. The tape spun forward by itself, scenes flashing, blood, screams, shadows moving like liquid. He dropped to his knees, the carpet scratching his skin, his breath ragged. Tears blurred his sight as he stared at the glowing screen. The man on the tape looked up, and though impossible, it felt as if the figure's eyes locked directly on him. His heart twisted as dread settled deep in his bones. He whispered, "What are you?" But the silence after was thicker than any answer. The room was suffocating, every shadow swelling with menace. James staggered to his feet, wiping sweat from his brow. He wanted to smash the tape, to end it, but his hand froze when he lifted it. A sudden cold swept through the room, colder than winter wind, prickling his skin. The screen flickered again. This time, his apartment itself appeared. James gasped, realizing the camera angle was from inside his own living room. His voice cracked as he whispered, "It's here!" His heart sank as the figure on screen leaned toward the camera, its face his own but twisted, smiling. A scream tore from his throat, raw and broken, but the smile didn't fade. James sat hunched on the couch, the VHS tape spinning back and forth in his trembling hands. His eyes were bloodshot, his mind consumed by questions. He pressed rewind, then play, then rewind again, hoping the images would change. But they never did. The man on the screen was always him, dragging the body with calm efficiency. His chest tightened as the sound of plastic scraping floorboards repeated endlessly, echoing inside his head. He muttered, "It's a trick, it has to be." Yet every replay was identical, every shadow unyielding. The walls of his apartment seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the tape. Sweat gathered at his temples, as if the room itself was watching. His fingers slipped, dropping the tape, and for a moment, silence rang louder than the static. James stared at it on the floor, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. James leaned closer to the screen, pressing pause at every frame. His fingers smudged the glass as if touching would reveal the truth. He stared at his double's clothes, the way the hair fell across his forehead, the scar on his hand. Every detail was his. "This isn't possible," he whispered, pressing pause and play again. The figure's lips moved, mumbling words James could hear, but he swore he knew the rhythm. He staggered back, gripping his chair, breath shallow. The apartment felt smaller, shrinking around him with every flicker. The tape clicked, rewound itself, and replayed without command. James' reflection in the black screen seemed to merge with the figure inside. For a heartbeat, he couldn't tell if he was looking at the television or a mirror. James could not endure the silence anymore. He snatched his phone and called Daniel, his only friend he trusted. "Come over, I need you," James pleaded. His voice cracked, desperation seeping through. Within an hour, Daniel stood in the doorway, his face tight with confusion. "You look like hell," Daniel said, stepping in cautiously. James pointed at the TV, his hand trembling. "Watch this, tell me it's not me." Daniel frowned as the tape began. His lips pressed thin, eyes narrowing as he studied the figure dragging the body. He glanced at James, then back at the screen. "It looks like you," Daniel muttered, voice low, uncertain. James' heart collapsed at those words, panic rising. "But it isn't," he snapped. Daniel's silence felt heavier than the images on the tape. Daniel paced the room, shaking his head. "It's a fake," he said, though his voice wavered. James clutched the tape, his knuckles white. "Then explain this," James hissed, thrusting it toward him. The air between them felt razor sharp. Daniel refused to touch it, eyes darting nervously. "You need rest, not horror movies." His words carried no conviction. James stepped closer, anger rising. "Do you think I'd fake this? Do you think I want this?" Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The tape whirred inside the player, frames flickering to scenes James had never seen. Daniel glanced at the screen, his skin paling. The man on the tape turned to face the camera and smiled, the exact same smirk James wore when he was 12. Daniel stumbled back, whispering, "That's impossible." James awoke to a soft thump outside his door. His chest tightened as he walked slowly across the creaking floor. He opened the door and froze. A cardboard box rested on the mat, unmarked, damp with dew. He knelt, his breath fogging in the night air, and peeled it open. Inside were more VHS tapes, stacked neatly, each one labeled only with dates. Some dates were days past, others yet to come. His hands trembled violently as he read one marked with tomorrow's date. His throat tightened as he whispered, "No, not again." Behind him, the television switched on by itself, static buzzing through the room. The glow spread across the hallway, painting the box in pale light. James staggered back, the night pressing in closer than ever before. The tapes multiplied across the table, each one whispering dread. James shoved another into the player, his stomach knotting. The screen flickered to life, showing him again, older, colder, dragging a second body. His face was calm, deliberate, his movements rehearsed. James' chest heaved as sweat dripped from his brow. "This isn't me," he muttered, though the words tasted hollow. The sound of bones snapping echoed, though the screen had no volume controls touched. His pulse throbbed in his temples as he grabbed the remote, but the buttons did nothing. The scene continued without pause, as if mocking him. The tape ended with the double staring into the camera, lips moving silently. James pressed his ear closer, desperate, but no sound came. Only silence. James jolted awake at dawn, his shirt damp with sweat. He staggered to the sink, splashing cold water on his face. But when he looked down, dark stains marked his jeans. His heart slammed against his ribs as he touched them. His fingers came away, smeared with blood. "No," he whispered, voice strangled. His mind scrambled, searching for a rational answer, but none came. He gripped the counter, knuckles white, the bathroom light flickering above him. He tore at the stains, scrubbing until his hands turned raw, but the crimson spread deeper into the fabric. The reflection in the mirror blurred with tears as he stared into his own eyes, searching for proof of innocence. Instead, all he saw was a stranger. James stumbled through the streets that night, mind unraveling. He felt watched, hunted by something unseen. At the edge of an alley, a man stepped into view. His coat was long, frayed, his eyes sharp with secrets. "The tape doesn't lie," the stranger said, voice like gravel. James froze, chest tightening. "What are you talking about?" The man smiled faintly, almost pitying. "But it doesn't tell the whole truth." The words slithered into James' ears, leaving his skin cold. He stepped forward, desperate, but the man backed into the shadows. The alley seemed to swallow him whole. James stood frozen, his heart racing, the stranger's words echoing louder than the silence. The police station reeked of stale coffee and paper. James sat across from Detective Harris, sweat dripping into his collar. "I didn't do this," James pleaded, voice hoarse. Harris leaned back, eyes sharp with suspicion. "The evidence says otherwise," he replied coldly, flipping through photos of crime scenes. Each image mirrored the tapes. James shook his head violently. "I was at home, I swear." Harris smirked slightly, disbelief plain on his face. "Your alibis don't hold. People saw you." James' stomach churned. His own reflection in the glass window behind Harris seemed to nod, mocking him. For a moment, James swore he saw his double smile. James staggered home, his thoughts a storm. The tape spread across the floor like evidence of a crime scene. His body trembled as he stared at them, each one bearing a date. The most recent was tomorrow. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head, whispering, "What if it's me? What if I don't remember?" The silence of the apartment pressed down on him, broken only by the faint hum of static. His breathing grew ragged as he began pacing, then laughing weakly at the madness of it. He stopped abruptly, staring at the door as if expecting someone to enter. Shadows swayed unnaturally on the walls, though no one else was there. He realized with chilling clarity that he no longer trusted himself. James' chest pounded as Daniel returned the next day. His friend's face looked colder, guarded. James rushed forward, shoving another tape into his hands. "You believe me now, don't you?" James demanded, desperation spilling through. Daniel hesitated, then pulled a small drive from his pocket. "I already showed them," he admitted, eyes avoiding James. James froze, blood draining from his face. You betrayed me." His voice cracked into a rasp. Daniel's silence was answer enough. Rage and despair tangled in James' chest, the room spinning. The tapes hummed like voices pressing against the walls. James' trembling hands reached for one, but Daniel stepped back. "It's for your own good," Daniel muttered, though the guilt in his voice was thin. The interrogation room was colder this time, the air suffocating. James sat chained to the table, his wrists raw. Detective Harris leaned forward, voice sharp. "What? We've got witnesses. We've got evidence. You want to tell me how you're on every tape?" James shook his head violently, his voice breaking. "It's not me, I swear." Harris tapped a folder, photos spilling across the table. Each one matched frames James had seen on the tapes. His stomach lurched. Harris narrowed his eyes. "You keep saying you're innocent, but the world sees otherwise." James's lips quivered. His reflection in the one-way mirror seemed to smirk back at him. For a heartbeat, he swore it wasn't just a reflection, but someone standing on the other side. That night, news blared from the television in the holding cell. James sat frozen as he watched. Another victim had been found, body discovered in an alley, wrapped in plastic. The method was identical to the tapes. His breath rattled, shallow and frantic. He pressed his forehead against the cold bars, whispering, "It wasn't me." But deep inside, doubt gnawed. The camera on the ceiling tilted slightly, its lens glinting. James' chest tightened. Was someone watching, recording? The news anchor's voice echoed, "The suspect remains unidentified." James' double flashed in his mind, smiling from the tape, dragging another body. The silence of the cell swelled, heavy with dread, as if the walls themselves wanted to close in. James returned home under watch, his nerves shredded. He slammed the door shut, his heart pounding. Searching frantically, he tore through drawers and closets. Then he froze. Behind a stack of old boxes in his bedroom sat a small hidden camera, its red light blinking faintly. His breath caught as he pulled it free, his hands shaking. "They're filming me." His voice was a broken whisper. Thought clawed at him. Every move, every shadow, every breath had been captured. He smashed the device against the wall, pieces scattering like insects. But his victory soured when he spotted another in the corner, its red glow mocking him. He collapsed to his knees, dread dripping like acid. Someone was recreating his life, frame by frame. The apartment felt colder than ever. James sat surrounded by tapes and broken pieces of cameras, his eyes wide and hollow. He realized the scenes weren't random. Someone was scripting his life. Every action felt like a rehearsal. He whispered, "It's not me they're watching. It's who they want me to be." His chest heaved as shadows flickered across the wall, darker than the dim lamp should allow. He stared at the newest tape, trembling. The label bore tomorrow's date, etched in bold black ink. His hands shook as he lifted it, staring at his reflection in the glossy plastic. For a moment, the reflection smiled back, though his lips never moved. James dropped the tape, his scream echoing through the empty room. James' hands shook as he pried open a locked cabinet behind his wardrobe. Dust choked the air, cobwebs clinging to his fingers. Inside were rows of VHS tapes stacked neatly, far more than what he had received in the boxes. His heart pounded as he realized some dated back years, even before he owned the apartment. He whispered, "Who put these here?" His throat tightened as he pulled one out. The handwriting on the labels was jagged, carved in ink, as if with anger. He shoved the tape into the player, his body trembling with dread. The screen lit up, showing not strangers, not victims he didn't know, but him, sleeping in his own bed. His breath turned to ice. Every night of his life was here, recorded, catalogued, archived. He had always been watched. James staggered back as the screen flickered. The mysterious stranger appeared on the tape, standing in James' own living room. His voice rasped through the speakers, calm and deliberate. "The truth isn't in what you see, but in what you're made to believe." James' knees buckled, his hands gripping the table. "Why are you doing this to me?" he shouted. The stranger's head tilted, his faint smile widening. "Because the tape doesn't lie, but it will tell you the story it wants." James' heart thundered as he lunged at the television, striking it. But the stranger's image remained steady. The lights flickered, and for an instant the stranger's eyes glowed faintly, as if watching from beyond the screen. The next tape rolled by itself, the player whirring like it had its own will. James' stomach sank as the screen showed scenes of tomorrow. He watched himself standing over another lifeless body, his hands drenched in crimson. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I haven't done this yet." His reflection in the dark TV glass merged with the bloody version of himself. His knees buckled, sweat dripping down his back. He pressed his hands over his ears, but the sound of dripping blood echoed louder, seeping from the speakers. He screamed, slamming his fists into the floor, begging the screen to stop. But the tape continued, showing a future written in violence, a future waiting to trap him. James sat trembling in the corner when the door creaked open. His mother stepped inside, her face older, weary, her eyes filled with shadows of secrets. You shouldn't have found them, she whispered. James froze, chest tightening. What do you mean? His mother's lips quivered as tears welled. Your father. He made the first tapes. He said they kept something away. James' skin crawled as he rose shakily. Kept what away? She shook her head violently. Don't ask. Don't dig. The tapes are not lies, James. They're warnings. Her voice cracked on the last word. James felt the air grow colder, the silence heavier, as the room seemed to press closer, suffocating them both. James clutched the newest tape, the label stark. The N. His mother's words still echoed, but he couldn't stop. He shoved it into the player, heart hammering. The screen flickered, static crawling like insects. It showed him, older, bloodstained, screaming as shadows pulled him into darkness. His breath hitched as he realized the tape wasn't showing the past or present. It was showing his death. No. His voice cracked. The shadowy figure reached toward the screen, clawed fingers stretching outward. For a moment, James swore it was reaching through the glass for him. The room grew icy, the air heavy, as the line between tape and reality blurred into nothing. The room shook as James slid the final tape into the player. His hands trembled violently, sweat dripping onto the carpet. The television roared to life, the static shrieking. The image stabilized, and James gasped. It showed his own death. There he was, lying on the floor, blood pooling around him, eyes wide in terror. His chest constricted as the figure on screen twitched, lips parting to whisper words he couldn't hear. No, this isn't real, James stammered, shaking his head furiously. The sound of a heartbeat thundered through the speakers, matching his own racing pulse. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the sound burrowed deeper. His breath faltered, the weight of inevitability crushing him as the tape showed his final scream. The static deepened into a low rumble, the television screen bulging outward. James staggered back, hitting the wall. Darkness leaked from the screen, pouring like smoke, curling across the ceiling. His pulse spiked as the shape began to form. Long arms, distorted features, a face without eyes. The creature stepped out, its movements slow, unnatural, its skin black as tar. James' breath rasped as he pressed himself against the wall. You're not real, he choked, but the words felt weak. The air dropped in temperature, frost forming on the edges of the window. The creature tilted its head, and the whisper filled the room. It said his name, drawing it out like a curse. James' legs buckled, but he forced himself upright. The creature loomed, the air around it vibrating. His fists clenched, though fear consumed him. I won't be you, he shouted, voice breaking. The creature's body rippled, its form shifting until it mirrored him. Now he stood face to face with himself, identical but colder, sharper, smeared with blood. His double's eyes gleamed with hunger, his lips twisting into that same smirk from the tapes. James' stomach lurched, bile rising in his throat. He stumbled backward, shaking his head. You're not me, he screamed. But the double moved closer, each step heavy as thunder, until the floor shook with the weight of inevitability. The walls groaned as shadows writhed. James stumbled back toward the door, but his mother appeared in the hallway. Her face was pale, stricken with fear. Don't fight it, James, she cried. It was always meant to be. His chest heaved as betrayal seared him. You knew, he screamed, his voice raw. Tears streaked her face as she nodded, trembling. The tapes? They're not just recordings, they're bindings. Without them, it takes you. James' hands shook violently as his double stepped forward, eyes gleaming. Rage twisted inside him. You let this happen, he spat at her. She sobbed, but offered no denial. The air cracked, shadows creeping closer. The air split with a deafening crack. James lunged forward, grabbing a broken shard from the shattered lamp. His chest heaved, every muscle trembling as he raised it. His double lunged, too, their movements identical, a perfect mirror. They collided, the sound of flesh and bone reverberating. James screamed, plunging the shard forward. His double's smile widened even as the glass sank deep. Shadows exploded across the room, swallowing the walls in darkness. James gasped, his vision dimming as his double's face blurred with his own. For a moment, he could not tell who had been struck. His last breath came out as a broken whisper. "It's me?" The room plunged into silence, the tape still spinning in the player. Morning light filtered through blinds, pale and lifeless. Police officers moved silently through James' apartment, their boots crunching over shards of glass. The VHS tapes were stacked in the center of the room, humming faintly. But James was gone. Not a trace of blood, not a sign of struggle, just emptiness. Detective Harris stood at the doorway, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed. "Where the hell is he?" he muttered. The air smelled faintly of iron, though no stains could be found. One officer pressed play on the nearest tape. The screen flickered, and James appeared, staring directly into the camera, silent, waiting. Harris's throat tightened as the silence pressed into his chest. Days later, James sat in the back of a police van, shackled, his face pale, hollow. He had been found wandering on the highway, muttering fragments of words, his mind fractured. Reporters shouted questions as the van rolled into the precinct lot. James lifted his head, his lips moving silently, eyes distant. One officer leaned closer, frowning. "What's he saying?" James's voice barely rose above a whisper. "It's still recording." The officer shuddered, pulling back. James' reflection in the glass window of the van twisted for an instant, the faintest trace of a smile curving at the corner of his lips. The air inside felt heavy, as though someone else sat among them. That night, Daniel sat alone at his desk, face pale, eyes haunted. The guilt pressed into his chest, heavier than stone. He replayed the copy of the tape he had given police, his hands trembling. On screen, James dragged another body. Daniel's stomach twisted as he whispered, "What did I do?" But the figure on the screen paused mid-motion, its head turning slowly toward the camera. Daniel froze, breath caught in his throat. James' face filled the frame, lips stretching into a grin that didn't belong to him. Daniel slammed the laptop shut, heart hammering, but the faint sound of static still hissed from the speakers. The city slept, but James' tapes did not. Across town, televisions flickered on in empty houses, static crawling across the screens. One by one, images of James appeared, staring silently into each room. Families awoke, confused, terrified, as their screens glowed without warning. Some swore the figure on the tape, whispered their names. Others claimed his eyes followed them through the house. Panic spread in hushed murmurs, though no news would cover it. The tapes were no longer just his burden. They were multiplying, infecting every home they touched, carrying James' face into places he had never been. The city had become his stage. The last tape clicked into the player by itself. The screen hummed as static swirled, then cleared. A face emerged, pale and familiar. James, eyes dark and empty, leaned forward until his face consumed the frame. His lips parted, a whisper curling into the room. "I see you." The lights in the apartment flickered, shadows twisting across the walls. The sound of dragging grew louder, closer, until it seemed to echo just behind the listener. Then the screen went black. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. But from the shadows beyond the television, a faint whisper came again, repeating the name of whoever watched.